from content selection to publishing the content. And that's exactly what Sven Rimmelspacher did. Sven is a member of EO Ryan Roer and a long-time entrepreneur and podcaster. Sven, welcome.
Hey, Robert.
Hey, Sven. So, what brought you to the AI space?
Well, I started already 2016 with AI when I helped our customers in the manufacturing industry to prevent defects before they occur. And the last 3 years led me then to process automation and intelligent process automation. So that means automation together with AI. And by the way, I'm a member of Southwest and not Ryan Roer.
Sorry about that. Your talk is titled AI for AI, building a fully automated podcast on AI. How did you come up with this solution?
Well, I will explain that in my talk.
Well, that's a nice set, at least to start the talk. So with any further ado, the stage is yours.
All right. So you should see my screen.
Yes.
All right. Hey, everyone. I'm excited to share a story of innovation and automation today. How a simple question transformed into a fully automated AI podcast. Have you read the news of today, the AI news of today? DeepSeek released R2 soon. Alibaba releases a video generator as open source. Inspection talks about a completely new AI model, and AI confirms decades of research in just 48 hours. I'm Sven, and I started working with AI in 2016, what I just mentioned. And since 2022, we focus on intelligent process automation, IPA, the combination of automation and AI. And I'm convinced that only through seamless integration into workflows does AI unfold its full potential. Quality is not just a standard, it's a contribution. And every company, every person can make their individual impact. And our mission is to enable exactly that, empowering businesses and people to actively shape quality in all areas of life. Because true quality emerges where clarity, responsibility, and innovation come together. At About Zero, our company group, we are driven by this mission. As a group, we cover all key aspects of quality: work, production, management, leadership, and even life itself. Picard enhances work quality through intelligent process automation. Quality miners strengthen product quality with shop floor digitization. Rocket Routine empowers leaders with AI-driven strategy and goal management. And the Factory Excellence Network tackles challenges across the entire factory lifecycle. The COA Academy sharpens leadership through online management training, and Othership supports emotional well-being with apps and spaces. And together we create a world where quality isn't just a benchmark, it's a way of working, leading, and living. My journey has always revolved around learning and adapting. I spend at least 1 to 2 hours every day keeping up with the rapid developments in AI. The speed of innovation and the sheer volume of daily news is overwhelming. And that's when I thought, why not automate a news summary that helps me to stay up to date? But it wasn't just about creating the summary. I asked myself, how could I consume it efficiently, maybe even during my commute? The answer, a podcast. And that's how AI Briefing was born. By the end of this talk, I hope to show you how automation can match and sometimes even surpass human creativity. The idea of AI Briefing Daily wasn't just about my commute, it was about addressing a larger problem. I had to think about how I could select from the flood of information that comes at us every day, those that are really relevant. And that alone is a huge task that I can't handle. A weekly podcast wasn't enough to cover this constant flow of information. That's when I asked myself, could I create a fully automated podcast that delivers high quality AI news every single day right into my car when I drive to work? The vision was clear. a 5-minute daily podcast that not only informs, but also empowers listener to keep up with the AI advancements in real time. But where to start? I first had to think about where I would get all the news from and how I could process them in a meaningful way. So I researched a lot of news websites and tried to find out how I could get only AI news instead of maybe filtering out those news from an even larger volume of tech news. In the end, I found about 10 reasonable websites from which I can now get the news every day. This task alone is so extensive that this can be hardly handled by a human, and therefore automation was not just a convenience, but the core of the actual solution. Let me give you a high-level overview. The process begins with make.com, orchestrating a workflow that ensures consistency and quality. Here's a little breakdown. First, I start with data collection. Every day, the relevant RSS feeds provide the raw material. Second, content curation. ChatGPT selects and ranks news items. 3, redaction. Texts are refined to ensure they sound natural when read aloud. Then content transformation. 11 Labs converts the refined text into audio with human-like voice quality. And finally, publishing. Podigy handles the seamless distribution to platforms like Spotify and Apple Podcast. But automation isn't without quirks. While developing, and still today, from time to time, I face challenges. So, duplicates. A problem that I did not think about was that some news stories appeared multiple times across different days in the podcast. I only realized this when I was listening to the podcast one day, and then I asked myself, wasn't this news there yesterday too? And I had to find a way to prevent this. The solution was to compare the new news semantically with the older news. Voice issues. When you listen to the podcast, 11 Labs very often struggles with pronouncing numbers and percentage values. Then I formatted all the numbers as text before sending them to the processing, but this still works not in all cases. Sometimes it says I instead of AI, or T in German instead of KI. And this is even more challenges. I tested it to write it as A blank I, but that did not help in all cases. And the strangest thing that is sometimes you hear some gibberish words. And after talking to the 11 Labs support guy, it came out that it is caused by the pauses I had to add between the text, between the news articles. The only way to fix this is to generate the news article one by one and then merge them together into one final MP3. And that would be quite a new task for me. The changes in the delivery. Initially, I thought that adding intros and outros to each news story was a great idea. Something like this and that happened at OpenAI, or my perspective on the news is, but it wasn't. It disrupted the flow, and simplifying the format and focus only on a neutral delivery of the news fixed it. Other bugs I faced. HTML in RSS feeds crashed the entire process. Cleaning inputs before processing solved this. URLs of the news feeds changed, which then led to errors. Only one article instead of 4 articles was in the final podcast. Articles that were not news but advertisements for a workshop appeared in the news. A wrong date in the introduction and much more. But each issue taught me to iterate quickly and refine the system. Sometimes I made a fix at 6:30 in the morning after I recognized the problem in today's episode. But with every problem, I learned a lot, and this is my typical attitude as a quality guy anyway. You might ask why I don't use tools like Notebook LM for this, for example, and there are several reasons for that. It is very important to me that I have full control over the process because it runs 100% autonomously. Such systems, like Notebook LM, create texts and dialogues that are as they are and not as I want them to be. And at this point in time, Notebook LM can even be automated. There would be manual steps in the process, and therefore it's not possible to use it. Okay, now let's look at some details how I created this automated system. The process is executed every morning at 5:55. And by the way, all the process steps and all the prompts that I show here are simplified and shortened. So if you are interested in more details, just contact me. First, I retrieve data about the podcast from an Airtable, which is a database, essentially an advanced Excel table. Then I define some variables like today's date and until when do I search in the past. I generate episode data and other relevant information. After that, the first major step is reading the RSS feeds, the addresses on the internet that I use to scan for new news. And these feeds are also defined in the table. And when something changes, I just have to change the table content. I add a new feed, I remove one, I change one. That's no problem at all. And they are processed in a loop. And I check for new news articles and I clean up the content. And on average, and this is almost unbelievable, I find between 25 and 40 news items every day. Next, I retrieve the past 7 days worth of news from my database where all generated texts are stored. I then use ChatGPT to remove duplicate news, an essential step since news articles are often republished by different platforms on consecutive days, as I explained earlier. And to detect duplicates, I instruct ChatGPT to analyze the news semantically. If the content is too similar or if a topic has already been covered, the duplicate news items are removed. One of the most important steps for the quality is deciding which news stories should be included in the podcast. I assign ChatGPT the role of a news editor and podcast master and let it analyze the titles, the summaries, and the content of the latest articles. It selects then 4 of the most exciting, informative, and valuable stories, while also justifying its choices. And this justification we will need later again. The target group is also taken into account, which then leads to different results. For example, some of the news in the German version of the podcast are different from the news in the English version. Once the 4 articles are selected, I begin processing them. I loop through each news item, remove HTML and other unnecessary elements, extracting the core article from the source text and rewrite it into a podcast script. The podcast script differs from the original news article. Simply reading the news out loud doesn't sound great, so the content needs to be adapted for an engaging podcast format. At this stage, I also have to enforce specific rules. For example, the core message must not be altered. I don't want filler phrases, no introductions, no personal opinions should be included. The numbers must be formatted correctly. Exceptions of specific words are defined and much more. And I had to continually improve and expand this section with the rules when the arrows appeared in the spoken texts. Once the 4 news articles are written, I generate an MP3 file using 11 Labs. A specific voice model narrates the script. I insert pauses into the messages, which you can see here on where the arrow points to. And this is so important that the articles have some silence in between. But this is exactly the reason why there can be this gibberish in the result. And after generating the MP3, I upload it to my drive for storage. Then I use the Podigy API. Podigy is a podcast tool to manage and publish the podcasts on various platforms. This involves creating a new episode, uploading the MP3, initiating the production process, and much more. And this steps merges the intro, the main content, the outro, while generating metadata and show notes. And by the way, the music in the intro and in the outro is also AI generated using Suno. And finally, Podigy distributes the completed podcast to platforms like Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, and more. And well, at the beginning, I thought this can be done in 2 days or so. And it took me several weeks to fine-tune this process, ensuring high quality, eliminating errors, stabilizing the entire workflow. And I'm sure I will have and implement many more ideas for improvement in the coming weeks and months. Recently, we just started publishing the news of the day on a blog and on Instagram and on X. And last week, I had the idea that it would be really cool to create a weekly video podcast summary of the audio podcast, which would then be published on YouTube. This would be ideal for people who don't want to listen to the podcast every day and who perhaps prefer YouTube as a medium. Again, I built an automation that uses the audio podcasts of the week to create the news text that are better suited to a video format. And this time, the selection of the top 4 articles for this video is based on the justification that was written for the original articles. And I use an image generator to automatically create images for each article that I use as a background. Then I select an avatar from HeyGen that you can see here, with which I produce the video, and then I publish it every Sunday morning on YouTube. My wife isn't a tech enthusiast, but she loves AI stories and asks me very often what I do with all these automations and AI stuff. And since release of the podcast in last November, we listen every morning to the podcast during coffee. And it's exciting to wait for the news of the day because I never know what's on the show. Sometimes we discuss a topic or she asks questions about something she found intriguing. Automation in content creation isn't about replacing human creativity. It's about amplifying it. And what does this mean beyond podcasting? Automations like this can help a lot of industries in many different processes like marketing, sales, communication, development, customer support, and much more. So I challenge you to look at repetitive or annoying tasks in your workflow. Could automation maybe unlock your creative potential? Thank you.
Well, thank you, Sven. We do have a couple of questions here at the table.
All right.
So the first question that I have is, why did you choose Make.com and not Zapier?
For several reasons. Zapier is, in my opinion, a little bit complicated because I have a GDPR problem here in Europe with it. And the second thing is that the workflows that I want to cover using Make.com are much easier with Make.com.
How difficult is it to, well, get yourself familiarized with Make.com? Because I tried it a couple of times and it took me a while to get to understand it, how it works. But how long does it take to get it to know it?
I think that depends on your previous technical knowledge. If you are a tech guy like me, it's very simple, and I learned it very fast. But I think what is a good advice would be to use the Make. I forgot the name. Make Academy, I think. To use the Make Academy, where you have many lessons and quizzes and so on, and you can learn it by example. That's very easy to understand, in my opinion, and you can just click through the examples they have, and then you get even some certificates.
Curve. That's a question. So there's a steep learning curve.
Sorry, I didn't hear that. Yes, I mean, of course, it's a learning curve, but it's not so hard to learn it as some other systems, I think.
One final question that I have. So there's an enormous flow of news and information on AI. How do you make the top 4, the top 10, and make it exciting and worthwhile to listen to the podcast? How do you do it?
Yeah, well, this is one of the most important steps in the whole process. I have a ChatGPT prompt that I instruct to compare all those news I found at a specific day. For example, these 30 news of today. And I instruct him with a very large prompt to select for innovation, um, for interesting topics, for new technologies, and much more. And I focus it on the target group, as I said in my talk. For example, in Germany, in the German version, I say you have German listeners. In the English version, I say you have international listeners. And combined with all these information in that prompt, ChatGPT decides at the end which news are really valuable. And I find when I started working on this, I found out that I like the selection. So I compared all the sources, and then I compared these sources to the actual selection, and I liked it very much, and so I kept it. But I must admit, I improved the prompt several times.
There's also a learning curve there.
Right, absolutely.
Marcus, you had a question?
Yes, I actually do have a question. So now you have all the options in terms of who's going to be the host of the podcast. Have you already tried around with different personas, personalities in terms of the avatars? So maybe for the Jet Zen, you are more on the, also in terms of the words you're using different to a boomer like me. Do you have any plans around that?
Yes, I mean, the first thing that you can see is in the German version and in the English version, I have two different speakers. So that's just two completely different voices and styles of voices. In the video podcast, I have this lady as an avatar that I selected. And because I take the news and I rewrite those news with certain rules, again, for the target group. For example, I said that the people listening to the podcast are not deep tech experts, but they are interested in AI. So, for example, complicated words or phrases are removed. And of course, it would be no problem to make I don't know, for 12-year-olds a version that then rephrases everything in a language that they understand and they like and which is entertaining for them. And then, of course, I could use a different avatar.
Edward.
Yeah, I have a question from the audience. Giancarlo Rocafort asked, where can we get information to create the avatar?
If you mean the avatar, the video avatar, this is on the HeyGen platform.
Okay. I have a personal question. I've been following your podcast for 3 weeks now. I'm a huge fan. I can highly recommend it to everybody. So please promote your podcast and write where we can find it in the chat maybe. And
yes, it can be found on all the platforms, on Spotify, on Apple, on YouTube. And it's called AI Briefing Daily, and the name of the company is Pickard. And here in my presentation, I have all the links in it. So when you distribute the presentation after the summit, everyone can find the links here.
Marcus.
Yes, more questions from the audience. You seem to have hit the head of the nail here. But one question I really find interesting is the question is there anything being done to deal with all the misinformation, disinformation, and general overwhelm of information being produced by AI? How do you deal with this?
I'm not sure if I understand it correctly, but if it's about disinformation, I made the decision that I use only news from relevant sources. So I selected the news sites where I read the news from very carefully. And so I can be almost sure that the news are not disinformation news. And since I don't change the content of the news, I just rewrite it that it can be spoken by the voice. I'm pretty confident that I do not distribute some misinformed stuff.
We have a question from Juan Carlos. And Juan Carlos is asking about the engagement results of non-AI created content versus AI created content. Do you have any info on that?
No, currently not. Sorry.
So that means you started the AI version of the podcast without ever doing a podcast on AI?
Right.
Right.
I mean, that was just an idea, and from the idea, I got at the end this result. And as you can see, now we have the video podcast as well. We have the social media posts about the news, and it's growing. And I mean, the audience is growing as well. It's very interesting since we make not very much marketing about it. We have already about 3,000 listeners to the podcast since the start in mid of November.
One of the things that is a problem with generative AI is hallucinating. How do you prevent the system from hallucinating? What kind of guardrails did you implement for not making your own fake news?
The answer is the same as before. Since I really advise in my prompting of ChatGPT that it may not alter the content, and I tested that for several weeks in a row of at least 100 different news articles, I'm pretty sure that there's not much chance that it hallucinates.
Human eye looking at the outputs.
Yep.
Excuse me?
Do you also check it by hand, so yourself, so there is always a human in the loop?
At the beginning, there was a human in the loop. I did that when before I released it. I tested it on about 100 news articles, input and the result that came out after the rewriting. But since release, I do not check anything anymore.
So you're pretty confident.
But it's also what is also important. If you look at the show notes in the podcast, for example, if you open Spotify and you listen to the episode, I add the original links to the source of the news. So you always have the possibility to go to the original news and read it on the official website where it came from.
So do a bit of fact checking yourself as listener.
Yes.
Yes. Sven, first of all, apparently there is a demand for subscribing to your podcast. Please, after your talk, put in like the URLs for your podcast. They've been asked a few times. So
all right.
Great job here. But I mean, the discussion is really going deep here. There's a question from Mariam, and she says, in the era of climate and environment crisis, how do we use and consume AI responsibly, given the massive amounts of resources it uses? What's your stake on this?
I'm not sure if I understand that question.
You know, AI is taking a lot of energy resources. Now we're all just doing everything with AI. And it's probably a little bit outside of your talk, but your personal opinion.
All right. Now I got it. Okay. Yeah, well, I mean, that's currently definitely a problem, that the growing demand for resources is quite a problem in the AI world. But I think this is pretty much the same as like with renewable energies and a lot of different things, that over the time when innovation comes into place, that the demand for energy consumption is definitely going down. And we saw that with DeepSeek, for example, which was released some time ago, which uses much less resources than ChatGPT, for example.
Thank you so much, Robert.
One final question?
One final question?
One final question, Edward?
Well, it's not a question, but there's a hefty discussion going on in the chat, and it has to do about ethics and moral discussions So please keep it going all through the summit. And yes, some of the topics will be dealt with the speakers that have to come. But let's keep the discussion alive because it's super relevant. Robert.
Well, Sven, thanks for sharing your insight and your practical tips and your time. And I hope to see you shortly in another EO event. And in particular, I really would like to do another follow-up session with you to get more feeling on how you do it, really get our hands dirty and to create our own AI to do the podcast. And
Okay.
One final
Marcus?
thing. Yes, one really final thing, and that's for the audience because we've been asked a few times. Yes, this will be recorded. This is all being recorded. You will get the recordings a few weeks after the summit. And as a matter of fact, we of course want you live here in the program. The ones who are live here get the first information, of course. But yes, there will be recordings, and all the presenters who are willing to share their presentation, we will reshare the presentations and make them available, just for your information. Robert, sorry.
well, I think that concludes your contribution. Thank you. And then we can move slowly on to the next speaker.